for 30.
This is a Fox News alert.
Straight to that Fox News alert. Hurricane Harvey intensifying overnight and only getting stronger as it moves closer to the Gulf Coast.
And that's what it's doing right now. Texas and Louisiana under states of emergency, bracing for the strongest hurricane to slam the United States perhaps in over a decade.
Yep, and the power is growing. We have the team coverage as well. Janice Dean is live in the Weather Center right now. But let's go to Rob Schmidt. He's in Galveston, Texas, where people are preparing for the monster storm. And Rob, is it safe to say this is bigger than everyone thought?
Yeah, I think this thing it's crazy to see what happened. I mean, I got the call yesterday from our producers saying we got to go. And this thing just intensified so fast. The prediction of it intensified so fast. We're here in Galveston. We're about 50 miles south of Houston. This is going to be an outer part of the storm. They're probably going to get tropical storm force winds here. Could be worse. Depends on what this storm does. But if it continues on its path, goes into Corpus Christi, which is maybe 100 miles to the south of where I am right now, the big story here is going to be the water. Because this storm stalls out, and they're saying it could be days of rain, it could be feet of rain in Galveston, in the Houston area. They could be inundated with rain, and the flooding is really the most dangerous part. But let's talk about the Corpus Christi and Port Lavaca area. Port Lavaca is a small coastal town. Mostly, if you're in Texas, you know where that is. But it's between Corpus Christi and where I am in Galveston. That's where the eye looks to be coming in. And the big story there is going to be the wind, because this now, as we were just saying, is a Category 3 hurricane predicted at landfall. So it's going to be a Cat 3, they're saying, when this thing makes landfall. That's 120, 125 mile an hour sustained winds. That is a serious storm. This thing went from being a water storm and a water story to now a wind storm and a wind story where it comes in. As you look here on your screen, you're seeing people gearing up. We went to Walmart last night. Everything was cleared out. The water was gone. The bread was gone. Everybody suddenly taking this storm a lot more seriously. Let's listen to one woman near Houston prepping for what could be days and days of inundating rain.
Water, canned goods, some fruit, lots of pouches for my little boy to eat, so just trying to be prepared.
We just got to wait and see what happens. We're prepared, and we'll do what we have to do.
And as we said, you know, Louisiana, Texas is under, I think, a state of disaster. Louisiana under a state of emergency right now. They're calling for that. There is a mandatory evacuation in that area to our south, the Corpus Christi area. Anyone living between the Gulf and the Intercoastal Waterway, which is just a little bit inland, is told to get out. Everywhere else right now under voluntary evacuations. And then Louisiana, the big story. We're 12 years after Katrina now. This storm could stall out in the Gulf. It could sit there and spin around in that warm water with nowhere to go. It could intensify and then go up and hit Louisiana. This could be 5-6 days of this nonsense. So this storm really needs something, as Janice was saying, to get it out of the way. Push this thing out of here, turn it into a land storm, and just let it rain on everything else. But as long as it sits here, it's going to be very dangerous for people living in this area. Guys, we'll send it back to you.
It is indeed. All right, Rob Schmidt, thank you very much. Janice Dean is in the Weather Center. Janice, we were just looking at the hurricane track, and I'm a little confused because right now it's a Category 2, so it's a 2. But then you've got a 3 on the map, and then you got a 1.
Right.
Explain that.
What the National Hurricane Center is predicting is that the storm has already undergone rapid intensification, meaning that, 24, 48 hours we were dealing with a depression, then it became a storm, then it became a hurricane in a very short period of time. And that's because there's nothing in its way, and the Gulf of Mexico waters are like a hot tub. And so what we think is that there's nothing in this way of this storm strengthening before landfall. And the water temperatures, I'm going to show you the water temperature map in just a second. We're dealing with water temperatures around 88, 89 degrees. So a Category 3 major hurricane making landfall. As it makes landfall is actually more dangerous because the winds are going to ramp up quickly and the storm surge is going to ramp up quickly. And that is going to be, a big part of the story. But as Rob mentioned, the legacy of this storm will be the flooding, which we are going to talk about. But I want to show you those sea surface temperatures. So the reason why we think there is still room for this storm to strengthen is because we have got warm water ahead of it. Look along the coast, 89 degrees. So that's the fuel that this storm needs to strengthen. And we don't have anything in the upper levels of the atmosphere to tear this storm apart. There is nothing in its way, no place to go, just up towards the coast with very warm waters ahead. So you can see the hurricane right now, very well-defined eye. We're expecting landfall overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Hurricane warnings are up. But guys, the big story here is the unprecedented, historic flooding that will cause catastrophic, life-threatening damage, and that's why we are so concerned. Hurricane is one thing, yes, but the flooding concerns as we go into Wednesday of next week for Texas and Louisiana will be epic and very concerning.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Definitely an inconvenience to ask people to leave their areas, especially if they have kids or if they're elderly.
It's got to take your safety and your family.
It's not worth it.
All right, thanks, Janice. Meanwhile, 6 minutes after the top of the hour, a little bit later on, we're going to be talking to the governor of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott. He spoke with the president yesterday. The president's been on over this. It also helps for the president to have his chief of staff, John Kelly, who is fresh off leading Homeland Security for the past 7 months.
Right. The governor of Texas has ordered up 700 troops to the area that's going to be impacted, Texas Air National Guard and the Texas Guard as well. He did tweet out yesterday, spoke with President Trump and heads of the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. They're helping Texas respond to #Hurricane Harvey.
He also tweeted out a video of him visiting FEMA last August, and he said, as Hurricane Harvey intensifies, remember to plan ahead. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that the Department of Homeland Security is making preparations with the FEMA director, and he has talked to Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas.
So this guy named, let's change gears now and talk about Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You know, she used to head up the DNC, and she thought it would be a good idea to bring in an IT guy who ended up bringing his whole family from Pakistan, Imran Awan. So what he did when he was there is really going to come under scrutiny, because it turns out this person looks to be an unsavory character, and he's got 4 federal indictments for his actions. Yet Debbie Wasserman Schultz seems to be doubling down in defense of him, saying essentially he's been targeted because he's Muslim.
This guy was arrested in July. His wife and his kids decided to move back to Pakistan. He was employing his brother, his brother's wives, the whole family. So you have this Marine.
Making a ton of money.
Right. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have this Marine that bought or that rented out one of his houses and finds the smashed up hard drive in the garage. And he hands it over to the FBI. And that's how this ball started rolling.
Right. The Marine's name is Andre Taggart. He's a Marine. Said to the Daily Caller that he actually votes Democratic, but he had to work with the FBI because this Imran guy, the fellow who is Debbie Wasserman Schultz's former IT guy, just a bad guy. He said it's amazing that Debbie Wasserman Schultz said that the reason he was being persecuted by Capitol Police and the FBI was because of his religion. Essentially Islamophobia. And so what he has done is he's come out and he has revealed this, and he says, I just want these guys locked up and exposed. And he said, as well, the Marine did, the people who facilitated them should also be locked up as far as I'm concerned. Keep in mind, it was Debbie Wasserman Schultz who, this guy and his family was employed by 40 members of the House of Representatives on the Democratic side. So the worry is that he may have sold national security secrets to the Russians or perhaps other countries, because as we've heard in the last couple of days, this guy would do anything for money.
He had their passwords. He had access to everybody's accounts.
He had classified
they trusted
information.
That Debbie Wasserman Schultz had fully screened this guy. So they've opened up, most people are doing a million things. They need an IT expert. When's the last time you did a background check on an IT expert that showed up in your office that was kind enough to help you out? 0 for me. So they just trusted that this guy's okay. He's not. Dealerships on the side. There's accusations of money laundering. He tried to get out of the country, go to Pakistan. He had to be brought in and stopped by FBI from boarding a flight, or he'd be history right now. But the fact that Debbie Wasserman Schultz has doubled down on this, and she's escaped any massive scrutiny and still defends herself to this day and acts like a martyr for protecting him because they believe he's being targeted because he's Muslim, is an offense to most Americans, and should be to Muslim Americans who are innocent and wrongly accused.
And that Marine that went to the FBI, he's a black Democrat. He says he's appalled that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is diminishing the fact of the criminal behavior associated with this and trying to use the Islamophobia card.
But no one's covering this. It's unbelievable.
You're right. The mainstream media is not covering the last 2 days. 0.
But we are. Meanwhile, we're also covering this. The President of the United States, if you've been watching, he's been on Twitter a lot, and he's taken some shots at the Congress, in particular the establishment of Congress. He tweeted out yesterday regarding Mitch McConnell. The only problem I have with Mitch McConnell is that after hearing repeal and replace for 7 years, he failed that never should have happened. We were talking about this on the program yesterday, where there was a story in the New York Times that said these guys hadn't talked for a while. Last time they did talk, they essentially yelled at each other on the phone because the president was steamed that Mitch said to a newspaper that he was inexperienced and naive when it came to the way Congress worked, and he shouldn't have expected things to work that fast. Look, President Trump was elected because he wanted to get stuff done and drain the swamp and take on the establishment. Of course, Mitch McConnell is the establishment.
They got to raise the debt ceiling. They have to do tax reform. They also find a way to pass a budget, or else the government comes to a shutdown. The president made it clear: if you don't put my wall budget in this budget, you don't put money for the wall there, then I'm going to shut the government down. That the Republican leader said, I don't think we're going to come to that. And the president is pushing back. He's saying, I want something done. I've been your friend for 7 months, and that hasn't really worked out in terms of results. So now I'm going to be your coach to prod you to act.
Yeah, he's frustrated because the American people want this. That's why he was elected. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was on with Sean Hannity last night, and she had this to say.
We've got to focus on our shared goals, which we have a lot. It's Congress's job to legislate. It's the president's job to lead. He's doing his part. Now Congress has got to step up and do theirs. And we're confident moving into the fall that everybody's ready to come together, focus on these shared goals, and really get some big things done for the American people.
What he wanted to do is put the debt ceiling in with the VA bill, which was extremely popular. He said, jam it in there. People will vote for it. We'll be done with the debt ceiling debate. And Paul Ryan said, yeah, there wasn't enough time. And that just drives the president nuts. He says now, and I just paraphrase his tweet, now this whole thing's a mess. We got 11 days to do all this.
I got a feeling had they done that, there would have been a big argument over that particular bill because the Democrats stand squarely against it. Anyway, we hope to have somebody from the White House join us a little later on, about 90 minutes from now, to talk about the storm and politics, so stay tuned for that.
And whatever happens, I just hope the lawnmower's going if we're talking to somebody from the White House.
If it's Kellyanne Conway, you can always guarantee it.
I would not know what to do with a clean feed.
Meanwhile, on this Friday, while Nancy Pelosi crusades against Confederate monuments, we've just learned something about her own family history. What she isn't telling you, coming up.
Happened in 1948.
Was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? I won't do it tonight because I don't want to cause any controversy. But Sheriff Joe can feel good.
Well, President Trump hinting at a pardon for former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and some of the left not happy. California Senator Kamala Harris tweeting this: Joe Arpaio was convicted because he committed a crime. He should not be pardoned. But presidential pardons aren't exactly unprecedented, so why the outcry? Let's bring in presidential historian Doug Weed for a reaction. He's also the author of the book Game of Thorns. Good morning to you, Doug.
Hey, good morning, Steve.
Now, here's the thing about Sheriff Joe, because he has been after the drug cartels for so long. If he were to go to jail, what would happen to him?
He'd be murdered. I interviewed Joe. His story will curl your hair, Steve. It's in my book, Game of Thorns. I interviewed him before he was sheriff of Maricopa County. He served for 23 years as sheriff, but before that, for 30 years in the FBI and the DEA, when he went after the drug lords, the Mexican drug lords. They put a bounty on his head and on his family's head. He has stood with the victims of crime. This is a tragedy, what's happened to him. He should be in the East Room of the White House getting the Medal of Freedom put around his neck, not sent to prison to be assassinated and murdered, which is what would happen.
While some on the political left, Doug, are their hair is on fire, the fact that the president may pardon him. We've got some graphics to show that President Clinton pardoned 396 people during his time, 140 on the last day. George W. Bush, about 200. President Obama, 212. But you say there's something interesting about the 212 for President Obama.
Yeah, I saw this morning, Steve, the Washington Post headline had pardons, presidential pardons, rare but not unprecedented. My goodness, this is not only fake news, this is fake history. Presidents give hundreds of pardons, as you pointed out. Reagan gave 600 pardons. But what Obama did is the commutations, according to The Hill, the most in one day, and 1,716 prisoners had their sentences commutated, federal prisoners, by Barack Obama.
All right, so it would not be unprecedented for this president to pardon Joe Arpaio.
No, it would not be at all. The only reason Joe Arpaio got this charge, and it wasn't tried by a jury, it was a leftist judge, it's because he supported Donald Trump for president.
Oh, that'll get you. All right, Doug Weed, historian, joining us from our nation's capital. Sir, thank you for the historical perspective.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, have a good weekend. All right, meanwhile, straight ahead, the chairman of a college Republicans group receiving death threats. His crime? Calling on Muslims to denounce Islamic terror. What's wrong with that? He's going to join us live coming up next. And think President Trump is tough on terror? Wait until you hear this mayor's plan. Shout Allahu Akbar, and you'll get shot in the streets of his city. We'll tell you where coming up.
Good Friday morning, back with some quick headlines. Starting with a Fox News alert. Navy divers have now found the bodies of 2 sailors killed when the USS John McCain crashed into an oil tanker in Southeast Asian waters last week. 22-year-old Kenneth Smith and 26-year-old Dustin Doyon were both electronics technicians. 8 sailors remain missing. And a double murderer is put to death in Florida using an anesthetic never used before in U.S. executions. 53-year-old Marcus A. was convicted back in 1987 for 2 racially motivated killings. He received a 3-drug injection that began with the anesthetic. He did not make a final statement, but earlier this week, he said he was ready to die. Brian?
All right, thanks, Jillian. The president of a student Republican club at San Diego State University says he's receiving violent threats after writing a letter to the school's Muslim Student Association asking them to condemn the recent terror attacks in Barcelona. The letter reads like this, quote, "These acts of violence must now not only be stopped, but disavowed by Muslim leaders on our campus and our community." It's fair enough.
All right, students on the campus are now accusing the student GOP leader of promoting Islamophobia and calling now for his resignation. Joining us now is the author of that letter, the president of the San Diego State College Republicans, Brandon Jones. Good morning to you, Brandon.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
We're great, thank you. So tell us what happened. You sent this letter to the Muslim Student Association?
Yeah, so I sent them a letter just simply asking them to condemn the violence that happened in Barcelona, and boy, did they flip out.
What's wrong with that?
Well, the funny thing is that they're more worried about a letter that I wrote than they are about radical Islamic terrorism.
You know, it's amazing. They shouldn't even you shouldn't even have had to write that letter. They should have stepped out right away to say that's the terror part of Islamic extremism, and we are not that. But instead, you got a violent reaction.
Yeah, I got a couple threats via text message and phone calls, you know, basically saying that that I better watch my back and that, you know, that I've turned the campus into a war zone.
Well, in this day and age, you're very brave, not only to come on national television and talk about it, but you sent a letter, and I understand your phone number was attached to that letter, and that letter was made public. Why do you think it's so important to come out publicly?
I think it's important to come out publicly because really what it did was it just kind of exposed the left-wing indoctrination that conservative students are battling on college campuses. And so for us to come out and for me and my team to stand on the front lines and combat that, that's really what we're about.
They call the young Democrat socialists call this letter cruel and bigoted.
Yeah, the socialists, anything with the name socialist in it, I don't really pay too much attention to.
Bernie Sanders somehow just passed out wherever he is. Meanwhile, here's what San Diego State University says to you. San Diego State University takes seriously the well-being and safety of all our students.